Hope everyone's doing good. Just give folks a couple minutes here to tune into the stream. While we're doing so, I can blab. So I know the 1 p.m. Mountain Time time zone kind of seems awkward, but yeah, like I don't know where everyone's coming from in terms of time zones, so I didn't want to have it overrunning with people's dinner times, and then I have my own dinner time. I've put my kids to bed and everything. So anyways, we're sticking with 1 p.m. That's how it is. And you guys can always watch it again whenever you would like. Okay, let's get started. First off, absolutely made my day seeing everyone's lunch bags on Instagram. That was rad. So thanks for sharing those with me, gang. To do a couple housekeeping items with a few things that came up in some of the bags I saw on Instagram. Overall, it was just so awesome seeing everyone's independent thought. People are doing different designs. They're doing different closures, modifications. Anyways, excellent work. One thing that came up in the designs I saw is I told you guys that just leaving this binding tape edge raw and melting it was a good way to go. That works for me with nylon binding tape because it melts and fuses and forms a bit of a nice edge. One person's effort, and sorry I've forgotten your name, but one person's effort, they were using cotton binding tape. It was awesome. No worries on that. But if you cut that, that's an organic material, and that's just going to burn, and it's not going to seal up. So one way you could finish your binding tape is sort of extend your binding tape past where your product ends, and then do a double hem and just double it back on itself and your binding tape. And some other folks were using some different seams. And so we're going to do today, we're going to do zippers today, and then we're also going to do a review of some other types of seams, just because as we talked about last time, I really want to do process-based stuff here. I just don't want to tell you guys like step-by-step what to do. I want to present tools to you guys, and you can make up your own mind as to what's going to work for you. Okay, so today the main goal is zippers. We're going to make a zippered pouch today, and we're going to review, and then we'll do our zippers. How's that? Okay. Loop, if you wanted to attach a loop onto something, or if you wanted to have buckles, a thing we're making, or we wanted a simple loop to go onto our thing we're making. Once again, we never ever want to have a raw edge visible if we can help it. So if we're sewing this directly on there, sure, there are ways of hiding that raw edges, but it's much cleaner if you can have these items going into and just disappearing cleanly into a seam. Okay, so if you want to have something going into a seam, first thing is to mark where you want that item to go. You can either measure and mark with a chalk pencil, or I've just divided in half and did a little clip, and that's marking the middle of this piece of fabric. So let's pretend I wanted to have a loop in the middle of this seam in your design. As we talked about last time, we want to avoid doing two actions at once. So if I were to sew this seam together at the same time as sewing this into it, that would be two actions. So let's do it one action at a time. Let's say this is our loop that we want in this seam. I would sew that in first. Okay, there's one action done. And now we can do the other action of sewing this seam. And this is right back to our very first lesson. This is just a simple good side to good side seam. As I'm reaching my webbing loop or buckle or whatever I want to go into that seam, I'm probably going to want to do some reinforcement, some forward and back on that. Keep going. forward and back to end. Turn these off, and boom. Now we have a nice, clean way of attaching a webbing onto our item with no raw edges. And once again, we could binding tape that if we wanted. We could top stitch this if we wanted it to lay flat. We could do some more reinforcing. Boom. Okay, done. Next little housekeeping item from designs I saw on Instagram, which was awesome. One individual chose to do a French seam on his lunch bag. And so let's quickly have a look at a French seam. And then we're also going to have a look at a felled seam, F-E-L-L-E-D. Just a couple more tools for your toolbox that you guys can have. As I say, a good side to good side seam is what I use 99% of the time. But let's look at some more tools for our toolbox. Okay, so a French seam, which someone used on their lunch bag. This one is a way of having no raw edges, but you don't need binding tape. And so for this guy, you start with a traditional good side to good side. And make up your own mind here, but you probably use a little bit less than your regular seam allowance. So I usually use 1.5 centimeters. So I'm going to go a little bit less than that on this one to start, and you'll see why. So this is a French seam. Okay, so that's just a regular good side to a good side. And now for a French seam, and this is where it gets a little bit finicky. You kind of have to press this all flat. Now I've folded this over bad sides to bad sides. And now what I'm going to do is top stitch this. And I'm going to top stitch in enough that we're covering over and hiding those raw edges inside there. And so for your original good side to good side pass on this, if you did a long seam allowance, this seam would get quite unwieldy and quite big and bulky. Okay, there we go. There we have a French seam. Focus. It's not focusing. Anyway, so now our top stitch here has hidden our raw edges inside there. And so when we look at this from the inside, there's clean, there's no raw edges. And we look at this from the outside, it's clean and there's no raw edges either. I have never in my life used a French seam on any products that I make. However, it's a useful tool and you might want that for the stuff that you are making. Okay, last seam I want to show you guys before we go on to zippers is a felled seam, F-E-L-L-E-D. And I do use this seam on stuff that I make. I use it on some of my backpacks. And a felled seam you will find on your pair of blue jeans. So that is a felled seam. It looks really cool. A very strong seam, and we'll find out why here in a sec. And there's no raw edges, either front or back, and again, without binding tape. So you don't have to binding tape this. And as you'll see here when we make it, you do have to have the ability to top stitch this. And so it's only useful when you have two flat pieces of fabric. You'll see here on this pair of jeans, they did a felled seam. This is the leg we're looking at here. So one of the seams is felled. And I'm sure you guys can look down at your jeans right now. But then when they made went to make a tube out of this. They couldn't do the other one felled because you have to be able to top stitch a felled seam, and if you top stitch this, well, you're just going to close the leg, and it's impossible to top stitch it. So on this other seam, this is just a traditional good side to good side seam, which they had to do so that they could sew it inside out. I think I might be blabbing on and getting a bit too complex here, so please let me know if that's the case. Okay, so a felled seam, and where I use this in my products, the main one is the Ski Guide Rescue Tarp, and when I'm joining the middle panel of fabric to the outer panel of fabric, this is what I use, a felled seam. And so this guy, we start off a little more complicated now. So we start off bad sides to bad sides. So I've identified the bad side of that fabric and the bad side of this fabric. So bad sides to bad sides. And on the top fabric here, a blue one, I'm taking a regular seam allowance, so 1.5 centimeters. And the orange, I've offset the blue here. So the orange is going to be 1 seam allowance, 2 seam allowances where it's entering the needle. So 3 centimeters from the needle to the outside of the orange fabric, or whatever you're using for a seam allowance. Okay, here we go. Forward and back to start. Forward and back to end. Okay, so now we have a bad side to bad side, a seam, and we have some raw edges flapping in the breeze here. And then what I do, I'll show you guys up in the camera here, is I'm going to roll. The orange is going to come over top of the blue and then come down like that. So it's going to hide that raw edge. So it's basically like two train hitches coming together. Raw edge on the blue, raw edge on the orange. Roll them over. Okay, so let's do that. Roll over the orange. And what's very important when I'm now sewing this is I'm really giving some tension and really making sure I pull that bottom one nice and snug. How's the new camera angle working here, gang? A little better than my chest mount. Okay, there we go. A felled seam, just like your blue jeans. Clean, no raw edges at the top. Clean, no raw edges at the bottom. And a felled seam is quite strong because when I'm pulling on this, both lines of stitching are holding the force at one time. Whereas I don't have a traditional, here, let me just blast one off here. And let's say we have a traditional good side to good side seam. And then we're like, oh yeah, we're going to double stitch it. We're going to binding tape this. You're like, okay, yeah, it's double stitched. Wonderful. But when that's loaded, there's only one line of stitching that is taking that force. And then if that one were to blow, sure, that a second one would be there, but it's still only one line of stitching holding the force at any one time. And so if you really have a high wear or a high strength needed seam, a felled seam, both lines of stitching are holding the force, and it's really quite strong. Okay. So a couple more seams for your toolbox there, gang. As I say, a good side to good side binding tape seam is what I use the vast majority of the time. Okay, let's get into zippers. So zippers can kind of scare a few people, but they really shouldn't. So a quick and dirty explanation of zippers. There's basically two categories of zippers. One is a toothed zipper. This one happens to be a plastic tooth, which is tooth zippers would also be like a brass tooth, which is what's on the crotch seam of your blue jeans. Aluminum teeth, all those things are all toothed zippers, and they have really good abrasion resistance, but they really don't handle dirt and grit all that well. If something gets like a rock or something gets in there, it really doesn't like it too much. And toothed zippers are quite finicky, so they need to be finished at both sides with special little clips and clamps and everything. And same with up here, little clamp on there, and they can be quite finicky. So, and then the other category of zipper, and this is what pretty much the entire outdoor industry uses for backpacks, is a coil tooth zipper. Not quite as good for the abrasion resistance, but they really handle dirt and grit quite well. They go around corners much better. And as you'll see when we get to our two pro tips for sewing zippers, these require zero clamps or any fancy stuff at the start and end. You can simply just run your sewing machine over these to finish the zipper off, and they're super, super easy to work with. Okay, so let's just talk about coil zippers, because that's what we're going to be using. And I'll let you guys discover a toothed zipper process on your own. So with a coil zipper, there are, for years and years and years, the zipper was always made with this sort of a raised part up. And then, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, one company I don't know who said, oh, it'll look way cleaner if we put the zipper with on the back side up. And so you might see zippers, Arc'teryx here on my vest, they've used a backside style. And it's the exact same zipper. It's just what side they choose to have on the outside. And then waterproof zippers, well, they're actually water resistant. They're not fully waterproof. These are still just a coil zipper, except they have run the backside through urethane, and they're coated with urethane, but it's still just a coil zipper. Okay. And then we have different sizes, gang. So some standard sizes that I work with. There's number 10 gauge, which is really quite big. So that's what I would use on duffel bags, on the Avalanche shovel pocket of the Selkirk pack, things like that. Number 8 gauge. That's what I use on lid zippers on backpacks, things like that. Number 5 gauge. Oh, no, that's still number 8. Oh, there's number 5. I don't use 5s a whole lot, like maybe some very lightweight internal pockets, stuff like that. And then you can go much smaller. On this Arc'teryx jacket I'm wearing, it has number 3 gauge. You can go to like a 2.5 and a 2, and those would kind of be what would be like on a woman's dress or something, like really, really small. So most of the outdoor industry is 10, 8, and 5 is what you're going to see. And then how you determine if you want to have regular side of the zipper up or the back side of the zipper up, that's in terms of what slider you get. Is that focusing? It's hard to tell. Okay, maybe that's as good a focus as we're going to get. So this would be a backside zipper. So you can see this, a bigger part here is made to accommodate the bigger part of the zipper. So this is what I'd use if I wanted the pull tab up, obviously, on if I wanted a backside style. If I wanted this side of the zipper to be up, I would need to buy a zipper that has the, oh, there we go, focus nicely, that has the larger portion facing up, and that would match that way. And then they also have double pull zippers where they have this pull tab both front and back. And that would be something you use on like a tent, for example, or something where you want to be able to open the zipper from the inside and the outside. Okay, so coil zipper, number 10, number 8, number 5. And I buy these zippers off huge 150-meter long rolls, and I just have big spools of them coming off behind me, and I just sew them off and cut whatever I need. So there's no like pre-ordering of any length of zipper like you have to do with a toothed one. And then how you get the sliders on here, gang, is sort of engage one of them and then slide the other one on. And this can be a little finicky at the start, but after you've done tens of thousands of these like I have, they get fairly straightforward. And the slider just goes on. Okay. How we doing? All good? And if you guys want to work with zippers, you can absolutely, like if you have an old bag or backpack that is toast, you can absolutely like stitch pick out the old zipper and use that for practice. It's still good. It'll still work. Okay, so our first pro tip for working with a coil zipper on an outdoor item is number 1. You absolutely want to have the zipper start and end at a seam. 100%, absolutely. Start and end at a seam. Here, if you look at my Selkirk pack here, a big number 10 waterproof zipper starting at a seam down there. I've got another seam up here to end it. The lid, here's the lid, starting and ending at a seam. That's going to make our life easy, easy, easy. Okay. An example of what I mean by not starting or ending at a seam. Here's a pair of Arc'teryx pants, and you can see they just sort of snipped the fabric, and there's no seam here, right? This is all just continuous fabric. And this does get really quite complicated. I'm sure someone's got a great YouTube video on this. And literally the only time I've worked with zippers like this is when I've done repair work and I'm replacing someone's zipper. And whenever I see something like this where it doesn't end in an actual full construction type seam, a lot of swear words are uttered and blood pressure increases. They're a pain in the butt to work with. Okay, so we're going to start and end our zipper at a seam. Okay, awesome. The other pro tip is, and this will take a little bit of explaining, but you want to figure out, and I'll walk you through this, but you want to figure out how you just want to be able to cut your fabric at a line where you want the zipper, and you don't have to add or subtract any seam allowance. This is going to make your designs so easy, low stress. So let's make sure everyone knows what I mean here. So this is a, if you can see, this is my template for the side panel of a Selkirk pack. So the side panel is right here, and this zipper here is for my avalanche, your avalanche stuff to go into. Anyways, so this is the main big piece of fabric, and I said, oh, I want a zipper right here, please. And all I have to do, because I've done all this figuring out of seam allowances and zipper widths, which I'm going to walk you through, I don't have to add any seam allowance. I don't have to take anything away. And when I sew in the zipper, this panel then ends up being the exact same dimensions after I've sewn the zipper in there. And that makes life really, really, really nice. Okay, so let me tell you what I mean and show you what I mean. And also, while we're figuring out those seam allowances, we can also learn how to sew a zipper in. Okay, so sewing in a zipper and also figuring out seam allowances, start with no slider on your zipper. That makes life a lot easier. Let me just grab some fabric here. Sorry, a good YouTuber would have pre-done this. Sorry, hang in there, gang. Let's do this. Okay, so here's a piece of fabric, and let's say I want a zipper in the middle of this thing. Okay. Hold on, gang. Let me get a chalk pencil. This is really unprofessional. All right, sorry, gang. Okay, so let's say I want my zipper to be right here. Okay, Anil says that we don't need any to add or subtract any seam allowances. All we have to do is cut this and sew in a zipper. So what we have to figure out, you guys, so that a zipper is wide, right? And zippers come in different tape widths, and so when I sew this in, the zipper is going to be adding space. Ooh, that's making now our panel bigger than we want. That's no good. But when we sew this in, I'm going to be taking off a seam allowance. Okay, that's going to shrink things. So what you have to do is figure out, based on the zipper width, how much seam allowance and where you have to sew that zipper in order to end up with a panel that is exactly the same spacing. And if you do that, your life is going to be nice and easy. So let's do that here. Let me I'll set you guys back up. Okay, so first off, based on what slider I have, I need to decide if this is the good side, as in I want that to end up afterwards, or if this is the good side. I'm doing a backside style, so I want this backside to be up. So this backside is my good side. Okay, so all we're doing is a traditional, a good side to good side seam. And sewing this together, forward and back. Forward and back at the end. And now with everything that I make, gang, I do now binding tape this edge. I just don't want any raw edges. I'm just going to keep things quick here so we don't end up with an hour and a half long video. I'll flip this over and top stitch it. Edge from that. Okay, now we have zipper sewn on one side, and I always find it easier to sew with the zipper up, and I have a much more, I can monitor my seam allowance. I really don't like sewing it blind, as in with the zipper down. Like, you can't see where the actual coil is, and it's just, I just don't like that. So I always sew with the zipper up. And so what I'm getting at here, gang, is what you have to do here is figure out what sort of seam allowance do I need to take. So cut a line and measure your fabric first. Okay, let's say I have a 20 centimeter long panel. I cut a zipper line in the middle. I sew in a zipper. I measured again. I should end up with a 20 centimeter wide panel. If you have ended up with a longer panel, like let's say it's 21 centimeters, it's 22 centimeters, you would have to take more seam allowance because the zipper is adding too much to your length. If you did that whole process and you measured everything out after you sewed the zipper in and it was 19 centimeters, I need more width. I would need to take less of a seam allowance. I hope that makes sense. This is absolutely critical, and this is going to make your designs easy, because you can just draw a line and say, I want a zipper there, and cut the thing, and it's going to work out for you. If you have to get into adding seam allowances and everything, it's a major pain in the butt. Please let me know if I haven't explained that properly. Okay, the other side, forward and back to start. Last through it, forward and back at the end. Trim, trim, trim. Once again, I would binding tape this before I top stitch it, but in the name of keeping the video faster, okay, we have sewn a zipper into this piece of fabric. Awesome work. And now I need to put my slider back on there. Once again, just engage one side, slide the other one on, and we are off to the races. And now we haven't formed a pocket yet because there's no fabric behind here, but we will get to that. And we haven't finished the ends off. This zipper can just slide right off if it wants, but we're getting there. Okay. So to review, this was just to demonstrate the pro tip on number one, which is get your seam allowance figured out for your zipper and know where you have to sew on your zipper based on what width of zipper you have, so that you end up with a panel that is the same length as when you started. Okay, I think everyone understands that. Okay, so now let's see how we finish off the ends and actually make a functional pocket. And so let's make just a freestanding bag here, gang. This would be, if you want to make a pencil case or whatever you want to make. So same as last time, going through our process, the width of this panel, I first need to calculate a seam allowance, width, or sorry, the depth rather, of whatever I'll put in here, the actual width of the item, and then another seam allowance. That is going to tell us how wide we have to cut this panel. Same thing for figuring out how tall this thing has to be. And so just like our lunch bag, this has no seam at the bottom. So this is a big, long rectangle. So this would have, well, we don't need any seam allowances here, right? Because we've all figured out how to sew a zipper in so that the zipper adds the exact amount of fabric we're taking off for our seam allowance. So we don't have to add or subtract anything for our zipper. All we need is the desired height we want, and also whatever distance we want to accommodate any depth we want to rise out of this thing times 2. Because this is going to be one continuous loop here. Okay, so here's the big rectangle. That I have to cut out to make this zippered pocket. So the zips are the zipper is going to get sewn up here, and it's going to get sewn at the bottom, and then it will come together like that, and then we have to sew both of the ends. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm going to use a number 8 gauge zipper. And if you have purchased some zipper gang, get in the habit of, this is like a big long spool here, you can see. Don't pre-cut this. There's nothing gained by pre-cutting. Maybe your machine feeds a little bit unevenly. Keep the length of the zipper intact until you're actually sewn to the end, and then cut the figure. Then you know it's exactly the length you need. Okay, figure out what your good side is. And we're doing a good side to good side seam, and whatever seam allowance you need to have a net 0 gain or loss in length. Okay, forward and back, last through, forward and back at the end, trim threads, and once again, huge benefit of a coil zipper. I can just cut this thing with scissors, no problem. A toothed zipper, not the case. You have to get little wire cutters and like snip off each tooth, and then you have to clamp them together, and it's a nightmare. Actually, I shouldn't scare people off tooth zippers. They have benefits. You just need a little more patience to sew them. And when I'm binding taping zippers, I use 3/4 inch webbing as opposed to the 1 inch I use when I'm binding taping just a regular seam. Just a little bit less bulk. So once again, I'm going to pre-fold that over. Okay, so right now we have our zipper, which is sewn a good side to a good side, and we binding taped it, so we have no raw edges. Now we're going to flip that over and top stitch it, and so this is going to end up being a triple stitched seam. Awesome. Okay. So now I'm just folding this back onto itself, and we're going to sew the zipper onto the other edge. The exact same way we just did. Okay, I'm actually going to go ahead and binding tape all this because this is these actually form the internal pockets on the Wolverine duffel bag. So what I'm making here in the demo video, this will actually be a usable pocket. So we want to make sure this is made correctly. And if your duffel is one of the ones in the order queue, this will probably be in your duffel at some point in time. Okay, so now we have a zipper sewn in. One side is top stitched. The other side is not top stitched. And so what the heck do I do here? Okay, let's try turning it inside out. Okay, can I top stitch it now? No, I'll sew the whole pocket closed, right? Could I like painstakingly feed this in and like scrunch the underside out of the way so that I could top stitch it? Yeah, you could, but the easy way here is just to crack the zipper open so you have a nice flat thing to top stitch. Way easier. Okay, how's everyone doing, gang? Am I going too fast? Oh, you guys are all pro stars. I assume not. Okay, so now we have a zipper sewn on both top and bottom. And then it doesn't matter if you zip this together inside out, right side out, it doesn't matter. So engage one side of the zipper, force it in, and now we're going to close this pocket together by sewing both raw edges. And whenever you sew the ends of a coil zipper, they have to be zipped together. So I'm going to zip this thing through the whole way, and then I have to put that slider back on. And the goal being, before we sew the ends, is we want the slider on, and we want both ends to be fully and completely sewn. Okay. Now, like most products, we're going to do our final sewing with it inside out. And let's say we want, I'm not going to leave you guys again and go melt something outside, but let's say we want just a nice simple pull tab to be something to hold on to when we're opening and closing the zipper. So just like we did when we put that loop into our seam at the start of the video, we can just do a little loop of webbing here, or a loop of fabric if you'd like. Okay, a loop, and I've sewn that on there. Again, we kind of want to just do one step at a time. So I've sewn that on, and now we're going to finish the seam off. So here's my demo bag on the finished one. And so now when we're sewing these end panels, where this zipper is sort of rotated to is going to dictate on our finished bag. If the zipper is in the middle of the bag, well, we would just rotate this to the middle when we sew it. If we want more pencil case style, where we want the zipper up near the top of the bag, and we want more of the storage to be below the zipper, well, we just simply manipulate the zipper up to the top. And that's what I want on this one. Okay, here we go. So a little bit of safety here, gang. Before you sew over top of a zipper, it's a good idea to have wear a pair of safety goggles, or just do a good old-fashioned safety squint when you sew over here. Really common place to break needles. I'm again lucky enough to have a nice beefy industrial machine, so that's not usually a problem. And so I've done some forward and back to reinforce that. And if your machine is a lighter weight home machine, you might have to just manually rotate this thing forward. And if you want to go backwards, you can hit your backwards button and just manually rotate as a way of sort of easing it over the zipper if you think your needle is going to break. You can do that as well. Okay, blast off through to the end here, forward and back. And now to binding tape my main seam, I am switching back to the 1-inch binding tape here. Trim, and I will take this out to the hot knife after this video outside, of course, because I don't want to be huffing nylon fumes, and I will I'll hot knife these edges of the binding tape so that it doesn't unravel. Okay, now I'm sewing on this side, and I'm just making sure that I have the same amount of, if the zipper is down there or if the zipper is up here, I'm just making sure it's equal to the other side in terms of how much space I have up top here. Okay, forward and back. More forward and back over the zipper. Forward and back to end our seam. Alrighty, so now we have a inside out a zipper pouch, and how you open this up is just open the zipper up, and you can split that zipper all the way to the end, which is fine because it's all nice and reinforced there. And we just turn this thing all inside out. And there we go. We have our zippered pouch, and we have our nice little loop of webbing here at the end. So we can clip this onto something or whatever. There we go. Easy peasy. Okay, you guys can all make a pencil case now. One final thing here, gang, on zippers before you guys go off and play is if you are doing more intricate panels, or maybe you're doing a curved zipper, or maybe you're a zipper. Here's a performance satchel. Maybe the start and the end are on these weird sort of angled panels, and it's basically what I'm getting at is making sure that the bottom one side of the panel and the other side of the panel maintain where they're supposed to be, and you don't end up with some shifting going on when you sew the other side of the zipper in. And I'll show you a trick for that. And it's quite important, and I use this trick literally every single time I make a performance satchel, as in where the ends are not perfectly. Look at this here. So let's say here is where on our template we're like, okay, I want to have a zipper here. If it is an odd shape, what I will do before I cut my zipper is just make some lines here. And these are arbitrary. I could have made it here, I could have made it here, I could have made it here. It doesn't matter. All the line is saying is that this point is opposite this point before I cut it. And after I sew that zipper in, I want to make sure that this point is opposite that point. And that's going to ensure that our panels stay square to each other. Okay, so you make those lines, and if you are thinking of tackling a replacing a zipper on your jacket or something, you'd want to zip the jacket closed, make these a whole bunch of chalk lines perpendicular to the zipper, so that when you're sewing a new one in, you can use this trick we're going to see here and make sure that everything stays parallel. Okay, so let me set you back up here, gang. I know this video is again running long. Your attention span is awesome. We're almost done here. We're almost done. We're almost done. Okay, so again, here's my two sides of the fabric. So just like exactly like what we did before, sewing a zipper in good side to good side. For speed here, gang, of the video, I'm not going to binding tape this. Okay, top stitch. Top stitch. Okay, now here is a key maneuver here, gang. You get your chalk pencil. So now we've sewn the zipper onto one side, and now what I want to do is, so I'm flipping this zipper over and marking on the bad side. I'm drawing a chalk line that is exactly in line with that one, and I'm going to flip this over and draw a little chalk line. And now when I go to sew this a good side to good side on the other one, I have my chalk lines on that side of the zipper that are indicating where those chalk lines are. Ready? And then I line those up now with the chalk lines on the other side. And in real life, this type of zipper is easy. I wouldn't need these because it's simply just a straight thing. I would make sure the zipper is flush at this end, and I would make sure as I'm sewing that it's going to end up flush at that end, and we're off to the races. But if this was a complicated shape, you would absolutely want to do this chalk line technique. Okay, and top stitch. There we go. And bingo, bingo. We have a zipper where we've maintained this panel and this panel have not shifted on us at all. There we go. Okay, that was a lot of information there, gang. So we reviewed good side to good side seams. We reviewed binding tape and seams. We reviewed how to, or sorry, we learned how to insert loops, or this could be a buckle going in there. And that is a large part of the reason why on outdoor gear we're not doing felled seams, we're not doing French seams, is once you have stuff going into seams and you have zippers going into seams, you can't do all this fancy folding and rolling of seams. So that's why we use a lot of just good side to good side seams, is you can have stuff going into them and they still work. We learned about French seams. We learned about felled seams, and we learned about toothed versus coil zippers, and coil zippers being the easier ones to work with on outdoor gear, because you can sew the ends of them, and it's very easy to finish them off. And the main two pro tips there on the zippers, gang, is ending them with a structural seam, starting them with a structural seam, and critical to figure out that seam allowance. So how much of the zipper are you taking off when you're sewing it in, so that you end up with a panel that is the same size as when you started. And in your designs, it's so easy then. You just, I want a zipper to be here. Okay, great. I draw a line, cut it, and you're off to the races. Okay. If anyone has any questions, please fire them away in the live comments. I can answer them right now if you want, or you can email me, you can Instagram me, you can write in the comments. Happy to answer any questions there, gang. Next lesson, we're going to put all these things together, and we're going to make a shopping bag. And that shopping bag is going to have a zippered pocket on it. And I will have pre-designed it just for the speed of the video, but I will walk everyone through all the thought process and the steps and how we arrive at the design. And so it's going to have multiple panels, and so we're going to get into what that entails. So a little more complexity, and so doing all of our sewing and attaching handles and pockets to one panel, doing all the other stuff we need to do to the other panel, and then putting them all together. Okay, thanks guys, happy sewing. And also, if anyone wants any zippers or any binding tape or anything like that, I'm happy to. I'll sell that to you guys. I'm not trying to make any money off you guys. I would just do that straight at my wholesale cost. I'll just pass that right on to you. Yeah, there would be some shipping in there, but I would try and keep that as absolutely reasonable as possible. I'd not make any money, just straight wholesale cost. If you guys want zippers and sliders and buckles and webbing, there's no problem. Chris Turner, I haven't seen you in a while, dude. You need a sewing machine. Send me a message. I might have some options for you. Okay. Thanks for watching, guys. See you later. Ciao.